Bill is still in Ohio, and he was talking on difficult people. So what I did was I'm trying to stay in the same vein. So today we're again going to talk about difficult people. Now, the hardest thing for me in talking about difficult people was not naming difficult people. But I realized if I did that, then immediately my wife would start naming me as a difficult person. So I decided not to go down that road. What I did was when I started thinking about difficult people, I looked up on the internet, difficult people, and People magazine popped up with an article called The 10 Hardest Celebrities to Work With in Hollywood. The top 3 were Katherine Heigl, Shia LaBeouf, and Terry Hatcher. Now, if you were like me, I was like, I'm semi-familiar with them, but I wasn't completely familiar with them. So what I did was I added to it. What I added was anyone in the Kardashian family. Now, for the sake of argument today, we're going to take Bruce or Caitlyn Jenner out of it because that's another whole story. Just the core team of the Kardashian family. Now, it's kind of crazy or kind of sad, however you look upon it, because we've unwittingly, or maybe totally willingly, if that's totally wittingly, if that's a proper English phrase, to make these people famous and rich beyond belief and even more. But here's the deal. They don't act. They don't play music. They really don't do anything that's considered a specific talent. Yet they have this monstrous audience each week that watches everything they do, and they're taken in by every moment of, let's be honest, they're usually just being difficult, obnoxious people. Yet we turn into it I don't, but most people do, turn in week after week after week and watch these people. Now, they didn't win a contest. They haven't really done anything. They didn't invent anything. And usually what they like to watch is their boyfriends and husbands who are generally getting in trouble or just acting crazy. But it seems like we love it. I mean, they have huge ratings and they've made millions of dollars. Yet, I don't know why we would watch that. Because we say that in our own homes, we don't like controversy. That's what we say. That we won't put up with people who are difficult or obnoxious. We don't like that in our lives. Yet, we watch these people week after week after week. So don't we, or do we? Looking at 2 Timothy 2:23 through 26, it says, have nothing to do with foolish, ignorant controversies. You know that they breed quarrels, and the Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone, able to teach and patiently enduring evil, correcting his opponents with gentleness. God may perhaps then grant them repentance leading to knowledge of the truth, and they may come to their senses and escape from the snare of the devil, after being captured by him to do his will. Now, wow, that doesn't sound like it says, watch them on TV and buy their perfume and buy their clothing line and do what it takes to keep them on the air. What it really is, Timothy is saying, is give to these people the interest that's due them. And let's be honest with you, it's none, zero. Now, celebrities like the Kardashians don't necessarily exist in our everyday lives. We don't put up with what you see on TV here at home or at work. But let's be honest, the same thing can happen here. There are times in our lives, even in our homes, and sometimes in our work, and even at church, where we have to deal with difficult people. So the question becomes to us as Christians, how do we deal with these people and show Christian love to them, yet at the same time hold them accountable for their difficult actions or their personalities? Now, the Bible says that we must show love to these people. However, that does not mean letting them run all over you. That's called being a doormat, and Jesus himself never taught you to be a doormat. It does, however, tell us that we need to deal with these people, even our enemies, with love. Now, that's not easy to do. And guess who knows that better than anybody? God. Why? Because he created all of us, and he knows us. But here's one thing. He does expect us to deal with each other with love. And a lot of times in a lot of relationships, and we know this, it means us doing our part in that. And the other person, not so much. And that makes it that much more hard, but it also makes it that much more important. Romans 12:18 says that if it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with people. So God's telling you here, telling you, because you're reading, that you need to be peaceable, that you are responsible for you and your actions, and them not so much. And you should try, by God, to be peaceable. Now that does not make it easy for us to do. And that does not fix the other person when we're doing it always. It just tells you how God feels like you should handle things when they get rough. And it's not easy. Let me tell you a story. This is a story of a man named Joe Hamilton. I lived in Jackson, Tennessee for about 13 years. And when I lived there, I filled vending machines for the Tom's Potato Chip Company, if you've seen those vending machines around. It was a fun job. I had a big old truck that said Tom's, and it was full of food. My kids ate most of it. But it was a great job. I got to go out and meet people and talk, which if you know me, you know that I like to do. But I was also out in the public every day, getting to talk to people and also seeing what all was going on in the city of Jackson, Tennessee. And I had certain stops I would go, certain stops on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Most of them were once a week. So I came the same scenario each week. So on Tuesday morning, I had one specific stop that I hated with all of my heart. It was a place called Tom Lawler's Office Products. And I did it every Tuesday morning or somewhere around noon. Now, Mr. Lawler had long been dead, yet the name of the business was still Tom Lawler's. But it was owned by a man named Joe Hamilton. Now, he was a short, balding man with glasses, and he had, if you know what I'm talking about, a Napoleonic complex. And he was also best friends with my boss. You know how I knew this? Because he told me every time I went into his business. You see, he didn't like me. In fact, I'm pretty sure that he hated me, or that's the way he acted. I don't know whether it was my voice or what I looked like or what I had to say, but here's what would happen. His business was a big, long building, all fronted with glass. So I could see in when I was pulling up. He could see out. So I'm looking in and I would see him, and then I would come up and drive up to the right-hand side of his building, which I had to do to get back to the loading dock, which is where their break room was and the vending machine was. Well, he could see me. You know why? Because I'm in a big, giant truck with Tom's written all over it. So he would see me coming. I would pull back and go onto the loading dock and come into the building and be at the vending machine working on it. And I would hear the door creak open, and here he would come in and just begin to scream at me about whatever it was that he didn't like on that particular day. And he would yell, and he would yell, and he would end the conversation every time by telling me that he was my boss's friend, and all he had to do was make one phone call and he could have my job. He could have had it anyway, but every week he would come back there and tell me with one phone call he could get me fired. And this went on and on. And on Tuesday mornings would come up and my stomach would be in knots all of the first half of the day because I knew I had to come up and deal with this man. And I would pull up every week, and without hesitation, he would run back there and start in on whatever he was going into. This went on for years, people, years. So one morning on a Tuesday in 1986, which for you young people, the calendar goes back to 1986. I went in, pulled into his business, came up the loading dock, and came in and started filling the machine. The door creaked open. He came in, and before he had to open his mouth, before he got the first word out, I whipped around and I said, "Mr. Hamilton, I was just at another business, and I watched the spaceship Challenger just blow up in the middle of the air on live TV, killing everybody that was on board. Did you see that?" And at first he was just so shocked that I jumped on him. But he stopped for a second and he goes, "Yes, we did. We were here in the break room and we saw it live as well. That was terrible." And I said, "Yes, it was terrible." And he began to talk, and then he brought up Krista McAuliffe, who was the teacher that was on board that space shuttle. And he started talking to me about how horrible it must have been for her young school students who were in their classroom with cameras on them watching this and watched their teacher die in an explosion on live TV. And I said, "That would have been horrible." And we stood there and we talked about it for a while. And then I left. And then the next week I pulled up. He came in, I heard the door creak, and here he came in. Before he could say anything, I turned around and I dropped on him whatever the news was on that week, which of course wasn't as significant as the week before. But as I caught him off guard with the news, then we had a pleasant conversation. And I did it again and again and again. And before long, he was coming back to that break room to find out what it was I was going to have to talk about on that particular day. And before long after that, we ended up sitting down at a table, and I would close the machine, and we began to talk about what was going on in the world. He had a pretty good head for history and news, and so did I. And we began talking and talking. And it wasn't long before, when I would leave, he would slap me on the back and ask me how my family was and how my children were and how life was going. Now, about a year, maybe a little more after that, we'd become friends, and we would talk, slap me on the back, ask me about my family. I came in on a Tuesday morning, came in to fill the machine. The door never creaked. So I finished filling the machine, shut it, and then walked up front with a box and my keys in my hand and went up, and his two sons also ran the business with him. So I found one of his sons, and I said, "Hey, I didn't see your dad. Where is he?" And he said, "Well, he died last night of a massive heart attack." And I was so stunned. And then I turned around and walked out and climbed up on the running board of my truck and sat down in the driver's seat. And I just broke down. And I sobbed like a 2-year-old kid. I couldn't leave for a while. It was just, I was overcome with emotion. And their family invited me to the funeral a few days later, which I went to. And again, I went back out and I got in my car and I sat there and just cried for a while. And I couldn't understand why. Why was I reacting this way with such torment inside of myself that this man had passed away after he'd been such a difficult pain in my hind end for so many years? This is why. It was because I had lost a relationship, which is bad anytime you lose a relationship like that. But this relationship had been hard won. It hadn't been easy. It hadn't been simple. It was extremely hard. And it was a great loss from losing that relationship. You see, I had gone a long way to form this relationship, and now it was gone. Now, I thought about it for a long time, and I realized inside myself that I had learned a lot from this man. I'd learned, in fact, a lot more from this man than I would have from someone who came up and instantly liked me and began talking to me. I learned humility, because every time this man talked to me, no matter how nasty he was, I said, "Yes, sir," to him. Every time. No matter how hard it was, no matter how much I didn't like him, no matter how much I had to bite my tongue, I said, "Yes, sir," to him, everything he ever said to me. I also learned respect, because I had to learn to respect him as a person, even though he was such a pain, even though he was so hard to get along with, even though at times I didn't like him. I always told my kids when they were little that hate was not a word we used in our house. As close as you could get to that word that we don't use, that's how I felt about him at times. I still respected him as a human being. I also learned caring, because I had to go through so much, but yet I was determined that I was going to have a relationship with this man no matter what. Some way or another, I was going to find a way to break through to him, and I did, finally. So I think of him often and that whole time period of how I worked that relationship with him, and that has served me so well in all my life, because since then, and that was in 1986, I've had to deal with a lot of people who were as difficult as he was, or some more. Some people who actually hated me and was hoping that somehow or another I would not succeed. People who just wanted to see me fail or wanted to see me hurt. And I'm not alone in that. Everybody in this room has had people like that in their lives. But you see, we're different. Like I said in that prayer a few minutes ago, we go through our lives with this Christian title on our chest. We're told to love everyone, even our enemies. Christ gave us a wonderful, great, but not easy to follow example. In fact, Jesus was so caring and so forgiving that it may seem like at times it's impossible for us to follow him. We just aren't that good. But you know what? We are. We've been made that way. It's just not easy. That's why praying, coming to worship, reading the Bible, being in small groups, and surrounding yourselves with other strong Christian people that support you is so very important. You might be surprised to learn in your life that you can learn so much from these difficult people. They can actually teach you more than the ones that treat you well. And another thing they can do is they can also teach you by the way they act to care and love more the less difficult people in your lives, or the people that love you even more than you already do. The book of James 3:17 through 18 says, "But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy. Now the first fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." Now I talked about Christ's example to us. You see, Christ had to deal with a lot. If you read the story of Jesus and you do it intently, you see that he was dealing with people who were pains in the butt continuously. It never ended. And some of them were his disciples. Peter was always yakking. He was always bragging. He was always running for first place in Jesus' life, kissing up to him 24 hours a day, bragging about stuff, walking on the water and then slipping. It was always something with Peter. And then you had James and John, whose mother was coming up to Jesus and saying, "Can they sit on your right and on your left?" Then that's not even talking about Judas or Thomas. But also, Jesus had to deal with the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees and the Sadducees. If you read the Bible, you'll see that they continually followed Jesus. Everywhere he went, everything he did, messing with him at every stop. They were there at every miracle he performed, and they were there chastising him with every story he ever told. He always handled them in this great way. He always handled them with explanations. If you look at these stories, Jesus didn't run away from these people who were messing with them. He dealt with them. He answered them. And he always left them with some great piece of wisdom to help them, even if those people never used it. Think about the adulterous woman that was about to be stoned. You know good and well, Jesus was not wanting to be pulled into a situation like that. Yet here they were testing him and pulling them into this situation. And then, without yelling, without screaming, or without fighting, Jesus diffused that situation with one sentence. "You who are without sin, cast the first stone." It was absolutely brilliant. Just like, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's. All these great lines. Go and sin no more. He always had a great line to leave you with, to give people information. Now, we, on the other hand, won't always have a great line. We're not going to always have one of these great sayings to leave people with when we deal with difficult people, but we're not expected to. We're just expected and supposed to live out a spirit of love for those difficult people that we encounter. You might be surprised when you do this, and if you spend time doing it with the same person and you don't give up, you'll find out that there's a back reason for why these people are acting this way, why they're so difficult. That guy that's so hard on you at work may have a spouse at home that's cheating on him. That lady that has such an attitude at the customer service desk, she may have a child that has a debilitating disease. Or maybe you're dealing with a difficult person, but you know what? In their lives, they've been abused. Or they've had some kind of problem in their lives that's not so easy to see on the surface. Now, how you deal with them will make all the difference in the world to them, just like it did to Mr. Joe Hamilton back in Jackson, Tennessee. Now remember, when I tell you this, this is something you have to do on an ongoing basis, and it's not easy. But here's what the situation is, that you'll be doing what Christ has told you to do. And you might find yourself in a position where one day you're in a car sobbing when that difficult person you dealt with is gone. Now, is every situation when you deal with every difficult person going to turn out like that? Probably not. But here's the key. You'll never know until you try. And all of God's people said, amen.